How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Zayin, Daf 87 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, okay, first of all, I just need to give an apology. Sorry that this Daf is coming out a little bit late. The last week, and specifically the last few days, have been absolutely nuts between Tisha B'Av, trying to squeeze in that extra Daf on a day that you can't actually learn. And my brother had a baby last week. Brother and sister-in-law, unbelievable. That's awesome. But I was away for Shabbos, got back at midnight, slept for like an hour and a half, and then started like reviewing for this daf, and then I gotta go out to Pardes Chai. It's like everything's like all over the place. So my apologies that I felt slightly behind, but hopefully I'll get back on track very quickly. And today's daf is pretty cool stuff. Who does kisui hadam? Is it the person who shechs the animal or somebody else? We discuss when the covered blood becomes exposed. If somebody did kisui, but then it got unkisuid, do you have to re-kisui? What if the wind blew over it? Scenarios like that. Then we get to a new Mishnah where it actually is a topic that will sound familiar, I'm sure, that it talks about blood mixtures, when blood mixes with water or mixes with other blood or with wine. And is there still going to be a mitzvah of kisui hadam in this mixture of blood? And finally, the liquids of a corpse. I'll just leave that with you, and we'll get to it a little bit later, friends. That's what we have ahead of us on Daf Zayin, Daf 87 of Masechta Chullin. Come join me. Let's have a great time studying Daf Zayin of Masechta Chullin. Friends, we begin on Daf Zayin Amid Aleph at the Mishnah. Shochat v'lo kisa v'o acher chayav l'chasos. If a person shechted a deer, for example, or a chicken, and the shechter, the sheichet, did not do kisui hadam, and the blood is just lying there uncovered, v'o acher, somebody else sees that this is the case, chayav l'chasos. So the other person, the seer, the one who observes this uncovered blood, so they should take the initiative and cover it themselves. It says chayav l'chasos, they must cover it themselves. Kiso v'nizgale poter milchasos, says the Mishnah, that once the blood has already been covered already, so if a person shechts a chicken, for example, covers the blood, does kisui hadam, and then it becomes uncovered again, one way or another. Do you have to recover it? You don't. Poter milchasos, you don't have to recover it. Kiso aruach, friends, what if the blood was lying there and the wind blew and blew some dirt over the blood and covered it? So, okay, it's already covered. But, okay, chayav l'chasos, the Mishnah says, if the wind covers the blood, you have a chiyuv to cover it. What does that mean? The wind already covered it. What does it mean you have a chiyuv to cover it? The Gemara is going to talk about it. It says the Gemara, when the pasuk says, v'shofach es damu, v'chiso ba'ofar, the juxtaposition of shchita, shofach is essentially shchita, and kisui hadam, mi sheshofach yichase. So the point is that the person who does the shvicha should also do the kisui. The shoichet who shechs the animal or the bird is also responsible for doing the kisui hadam. Shachat v'loi kisa, in the event where the shoichet did not do the kisui hadam, v'o acher, and somebody else sees that the blood was not covered, minayin shechayav l'chasos, how do we know that this other person then has a chiyuv to do the kisui hadam himself? Shenemar, as the pasuk says, va'omar livnei Yisrael, the very next pasuk, right? Still in the context of kisui hadam, the very next pasuk says, and I say to the Yidden, azhara l'chol b'nei Yisrael. Therefore, it is a warning to all the Yidden that if you see uncovered blood that needs to be covered, cover it. Tanidach, we have another brayse of a shofach v'chisa b'meh sheshofach bo yichase. With that which he shechted, he shall cover the blood. Shlo yichasenu b'regel. You didn't shecht with your foot, don't do kisui hadam with your foot. Shlo yiu mitzvahs bezuyos alav, because we don't want mitzvahs to be disgraceful, I feel like disgraceful isn't really quite the right word, but to be undignified is probably also not the right word, but it's probably closer. The mitzvahs should not be undignified, which means mitzvahs should be dignified. They should not be bizuyos. But I think bazui is no good, right? Didn't we? I think in the bracha of Nachem in Bnei Yerushalayim in Mincha on Tisha B'Av, didn't we say something that Yerushalayim was bizuya? It was disgraced. So don't do kisui hadam with your foot. You didn't you didn't do shechita with your foot. Don't do kisui hadam with your foot. You did shechita with your hand. Do kisui hadam with your hand. Either use your hand to scoop up some dirt and do kisui hadam, or maybe you have a bucket, a bucket or a cup that has dirt in it, and you can pour it from there. But usually your hand should be involved, not your feet. Tanidach, we have another brayso of shafach v'chisa misha shafach hu yichasenu. Okay, as we said earlier, the shaychit, the one who does the shechita, should also do the kisui hadam. Maise, story time. Bechad sheshachat, that Ruvain shechted a chaya or an oaf. V'kodem chavero comes Shimon v'chisa, and Shimon did the kisui hadam. Ruvain did the shechita. And before Reuben had an opportunity to do kisui hadam, comes Shimon and does it for him. V'chivo Rabban Gamliel litain lo yud zuvim. And Rabban Gamliel required Shimon to pay Reuven 10 golden coins for having stolen his mitzvah. Reuven had shechted a chaya or an oaf, and he had now the mitzvah of kisui hadam. Comes Shimon and chapped his mitzvah from him, and Shimon did the kisui hadam himself. Gamliel required Shimon to pay Reuven 10 golden coins for having stolen his mitzvah. Tosfos says, Dibar Mascho v'chiyevo, about 5 lines before it gets wide. Says Tosfos that Shimon can't say, you know what, fine, okay, I'm sorry, I'll give you a new bird, okay, I'll replace the bird. That won't work. The zois mitzvah cheresi, because that would be a separate mitzvah, mitzvah rishona, holchalav avim uvas lo yucha liskon. It can't be fixed. When Shimon stole Reuven's mitzvah of kisui hadam, it's stolen. He can never get that mitzvah back. Tosfos then continues and says, however, lo dainina nahashta lichayev asar azuvim de b'milsa delays b'chisar and kiss lo avdin and shlichusay. However, it says Tosfos, nowadays we don't actually, in this kind of a case where Shimon stole Reuven's mitzvah, says Tosfos, nowadays we wouldn't actually fine Shimon actual money, since at the end of the day it was something that did not cause a financial loss to Reuven. So at the end of the day, says Tosfos, we wouldn't actually make Shimon pay Reuven, but nonetheless, we do see how important this concept is, right? Particularly, at least in this story, Rabban Gamliel did in fact fine Shimon 10 golden coins for having stolen Reuven's mitzvah. Very, very interesting. Yibodli asked the kasha, schar mitzvah or schar broche? When we fine Shimon, are we fining him because he stole Reuven's mitzvah or because he stole Reuven's bracha? L'may nafkamina? What's the nafkamina? The birkas hamazon. What if Shimon stole Reuven's opportunity to say birkas hamazon? How did he steal the opportunity? I don't know. Maybe he stole his lunch. Maybe there were like a few of them there, and maybe Reuven was gonna lead the benching, and then Shimon just did it. I don't know. But if Shimon stole Reuven's mitzvah of benching, so amrat schar mitzvah achasi. If we say that Shimon needs to pay Reuven for the schar mitzvah that he stole from him, well, it's only one mitzvah, birkas hamazon. Amrat schar broche. But if you're saying that Shimon is paying Reuven the reward that he stole from him of the brachas, well, I buy him. Well, there's 4 brachas in benching. That would be 40, right? 10 golden coins times 40 times 4, 40 golden coins. So if it's the mitzvah, it's 10 golden coins. If it's the brachas by benching, it would be 40 golden coins. What is the halacha? Is it about the brachas or is it about the Mitzvah Tashma coming here. The Amalei Mina, the Rebbe, a certain shmendrik, a min, a heretic, said to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Misha Yotzer Harim Loi Bara Ruach, Misha Bara Ruach Lo Yotzer Harim. The Rebbeinu Shalom, the God that created the mountains, is not the God that created the winds, and the God that created the winds is not the God who created the mountains. The Chsiv, as the Pasuk says in Amos, Ki hine Yotzer Harim Uvore Ruach. There is the creator of the mountains and also the Yotzer of the Harim, and there's also the Borei of the Ruach, two separate gods. Omerle Shaita. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi says to this heretic, you are a fool, you fool. Shvil the Sefer Dikra, that very same pasuk, just jump ahead a few words in the same pasuk. Hashem Tzvakis Shmai. It's all the Rabbeinu Shalom. It's all just the Rabbeinu Shalom. And the Shmendrik says, you may have won the battle, but you have not won the war. Give me 3 days and I'll come back with your rebuttal. I'll give you a rebuttal. Yosef Rebbe Tlos Tainisa, and Rebbe fasted for 3 days that this heretic's rebuttal shall fail. And finally, after 3 days, when Rebbe wanted to finally sit down to a meal, to a Suda, Amruleh, the people of his house, said to Rebbe, Mina koya abova, the min, the shmendrik, has arrived. Omar vayitnu bivarusi rosh v'goymer. And Rebbe says, brother, just when I was sitting down to eat my meal, bivarusi, when I was sitting down to eat my meal, rosh, right? I think it's probably like rosh v'la'ana, like just poison or whatever. I'm finally sitting down to eat my Suda, and here comes a shmendrik to ruin it. Amalei, Rebbe Mavaser Toivis Aniloch. And it turns out it wasn't the shmendrik, it was a different shmendrik. And the different shmendrik says, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, I have good news for you. Loi matza tshuve oyivcha. The original shmendrik could not find a good rebuttal to your answer. And he happened to have just fallen off of a roof and died. So, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, as far as you're concerned, you don't have to worry about his rebuttal. He's dead. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi says to the new shmendrik, you want to eat with me? And he says, I do. After they ate the Suda, now Rabbi Yehuda Anasi did not want this heretic to be there for benching, because he's a heretic after all. So he offered the heretic two options. Either you could stay for benching, or instead I can give you 40 golden coins and you'll leave. Rashi says the 40 golden coins would be the 40 golden coins would be whatever relative to the 40 amens, the 4 amens that he would answer for the brachos, i.e. 10 golden coins for each bracha. So Rebbe says to the new shmendrik, he says, you could stay for benching, or I could give you 40 zuzes. And he says, I'll stay for benching. Okay. A baskol emanated from the heavens and said, we see that a cup of blessing for Birkas Hamazon is 40 golden coins. So it would appear from this story that in terms of our question of is the payment for the mitzvah or for the bracha, it sounds like it would be bracha related, which is why Birkas Hamazon is 40 golden coins as proclaimed by the Baskol. Amr Yitzchak says, Adayin yeshna la'oisa mishpacha ben gidolei Romi. Apparently that heretic, his family is still, I guess the new heretic, his family is still among the elite in Rome. According to Osa Mishpachas Bar Luyanis. And if you want to look them up and check their history on Wikipedia, look up the family of Bar Luyanis. And now we get to the latter part of the Mishnah where we learn about blood that has become covered, blood that has become exposed. So the Mishnah had said, Kisov in his galet. If you already did kisui hadam, and then it got unkisui hadam, it got exposed. Why is kisui hadam different to hashavas aveda? The Amamar where it says, Hoshev afilu me'apayim, that by hashavas aveda, even if you have to return the same object over and over and over, it keeps getting lost. You have to return it 100 times even. Return it 100 times. Yet over here, you cover the blood once, and that's it. It gets exposed. You don't have to recover it. So Rav Ashi responds, Hasam loy ksiv miuta, ocha ksiv miuta v'chisa hu. That when it comes to it, hashev is kind of open-ended. Return it however many times you have to. V'chisa hu, cover it. It is a limiting limiter. And therefore, it's saying that you only have to cover the blood once. So if you have the blood, you do kisui hadam once, done forever. Kisui ruach. Now the Mishnah had said that if the wind covers the blood, if the kisui ruach chayiv l'chasos, you have to cover it. Now what does that mean? Because the wind already covered it. Now this is taka a Mishnah that we've seen a few times before in the context of dichui eitzel mitzvahs. The first time we saw it, I believe, was in Masechta Sukkah, when we talk about dichui by the hadas with the berries and removing the berries and the berries growing, etc. So this is a famous Mishnah in the context of dichui eitzel mitzvahs, that says the Gemara, when we say that if the wind covered the blood, chayiv l'chasas, you have to cover it, that's only if it then got uncovered. So if you have the blood and the wind blows and some dirt covers the blood, so now it's covered. So when we say chayiv l'chasas, you have a chiyuv to do kisui hadam, that's if the blood became exposed once again, so then you have a chiyuv to cover it now. But if the wind covered the blood and it remained covered, so that's it. You don't have to do anything. Now says the Gemara, but 1 second. I would think, or I will argue, that you have the blood on the floor and the wind blows and blows some dirt over the blood and covers the blood. Done. There's no longer blood to be covered. The wind blew dirt and covered the blood. That's nidche. The mitzvah of kisui hadam is nidche. It's gone. The wind blew some dirt, covered the blood. The mitzvah of kisui hadam is gone. It's done. I didn't have the opportunity to. Okay, it's nidche. You missed out. When the blood becomes re-exposed, it doesn't matter. It's already dichud, it's already been pushed off. The mitzvah is gone. When the wind blew initially and the dirt covered the blood, the mitzvah is gone. Doesn't matter that it got re-exposed. Again, who cares that it became re-exposed? It's already nidche. The mitzvah is gone. The wind blew, the mitzvah is gone. Says Rav Papa, the very fact that if the blood gets re-exposed, you have to do kisui hadam now, means that there's no concept. It proves, says Rav Papa, that there's no concept of dichui when it comes to mitzvahs. When it comes to a mitzvah, that you shechted a chicken, and you have a mitzvah of kisui hadam, and before you had the opportunity to do the mitzvah, the wind came and blew some dirt over the blood, so now you can't do kisui hadam because it's already been covered. But that mitzvah is still lurking under the surface and waiting so that if the blood becomes re-exposed, the mitzvah stands. By mitzvahs, it doesn't get pushed off forever. When there becomes an opportunity, when an opportunity arises now to be able to do it now. Why is that different than that which we learn in the Brisa? How come we say that when the wind blows and covers the blood, there's no chiyuv of kisui hadam anymore, and yet we learn in the Brisa, again, if a person shechs v'nivla dam b'karka and the blood lands on the ground and gets absorbed, chayiv l'chasos, you still do have a chiyuv of kisui hadam. I thought it says that it got swallowed in the ground. Why do you still have a chiyuv? So awesome, kisharishuma nikar. There you could still see where the blood is. When we're talking about the wind blowing and covering it, you can't even see the blood anymore. It's mamish completely and thoroughly covered. So in that case, you don't have to do kisui hadam until it gets re-exposed. If it gets re-exposed, then the mitzvah stands, says Rav Papa, ein dichu ed so mitzvahs, and you will do the mitzvah then. If, however, the blood falls on the ground, it gets absorbed in the ground, but you could still see it, so you could still do kisui hadam. And now we get to a new Mishnah, where we discuss blood mixtures. I think that this Mishnah may sound familiar to us because we have seen very similar Mishnahs before. Dam shenis ariv b'moyim. If blood gets mixed together with water, of course, this is now in the context of kisui hadam, as the Gemara is going to quote a Mishnah that we've seen before in the context of zrikas hadam by korbanis. Masechtas Zvachim. So by kisui hadam, blood that gets mixed zusammen with water, mariz dam, so long as it still looks like blood, chayv l'chasos, the chiyuv of kisui hadam stands, remains. You got to do kisui hadam. Nis'ariv bayoyin. What if the blood got mixed with wine, and it's a little bit, that makes it, we're talking about red wine. You know, if blood gets mixed in water, okay, so water and blood gets mixed with water, so you can kind of look and see, does it still look like blood or not? If blood gets mixed with wine, it's harder to tell because wine is already red. So it gets harder to tell, like, does it still look like blood or wine or what? So ronoso ki'ilu hu moyim, so we say, well, if the equal amount of wine was not in fact wine, but it was water, and this combination of blood with that amount of water, would it still look like blood? So the answer to that question would be, well, if the answer to that question is yes, it would still look like blood if it was water instead of wine. So then there's kisui hadam. The answer is no, then there's no kisui hadam. This ariv bedam abehema, or bedam achaya, if the blood, if the blood of that requires kisui hadam got mixed with the blood of a behema, blood of a behema does not require kisui hadam, or the blood of a chaya. Rashi says, for example, if you had to do bloodletting on a chaya, so this isn't from shchita, so there's no chiyuv of kisui hadam. So basically, you have blood that is chayiv in kisui hadam that got mixed with blood that is not chayiv in kisui hadam. So it's the same thing. And also ki'ilu in moyim. Once again, we take the blood that does not require kisui hadam, and we view it as if it was water, and if that amount of water was mixed with blood, would it look like blood or would it look like water? If it looks like blood, there's kisui hadam. If it looks like water, there's no kisui hadam. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein dam avatul dam. Rabbi Yehuda says when it comes to blood, min b'mino lo batil. Rabbi Yehuda says that if blood that requires kisui hadam gets mixed with other blood, says Rabbi Yehuda, it will require kisui hadam because that blood that requires kisui hadam will not be batul, and it will still require kisui hadam, regardless of the mixture of how much other blood is there. Next, we are going to, the next part of the Mishnah discusses the concept that we saw just the other day on Daf Pei Gimel, so that was 4 days ago. Dam anitas v'shalasakin, blood that spritzes away, or blood that is on the knife, chayv l'chasos, you got to do kisui hadam with that blood as well. Rabbi Yehuda, however, Rabbi Yehuda comes to explain that is a masai. When is that? Bisman she'ein sham dam elahu, if that is the only blood that is there. You're right, if you lost the rest of the blood, it's unavailable. You can't do kisui hadam with the rest of the blood. This is the only blood that you have, the blood that remains on the knife, or that spritzed, spritzed away. So that's when you do kisui hadam with that blood. Avol yesham dam shalou potu milechasus. But if you have other blood, if when you shech the animal, the chicken, and there's blood that falls onto the dirt, and you do kisui hadam there, you don't have to now go to the knife and do kisui hadam with that blood also, or find any other blood that may have spritzed with it. No, you don't need to do it. So again, when the Mishnah says that there's kisui hadam for the blood that's on the knife or that spritzed away, that's only if for whatever reason there's no other blood for you to do kisui hadam with. If there's other blood for you to do kisui hadam with, so do blood with that with the kisui hadam blood, and that's fine. You don't have to go after the blood that's on the knife or that's spritzed away. It says the Gemara. This is very interesting because now we are going to make a comparison between the mixture of blood and water or whatever when it comes to kisui hadam versus the mixture when it comes to korbanos for zrikas hadam. We're going to see that by korbanos we're more selective in what blood we can do zrikas hadam with versus what blood would be chayiv in kisui hadam. Says the Gemara quotes a Mishnah. I didn't actually look up where this Mishnah was. I think it's probably Masechtas Zvachim. Though it's quoted also in Menachos. I didn't look it up. I assume it's probably Masechtas Zvachim. Tanan, awesome. We learned over there. Maybe it's in both. I don't know. But it's in the context of Zrikas Hadam. Dam shenis arev b'moyim. If you have blood that gets mixed together with water, again, it's basically the identical Mishnah. Im yesh bo Myra's dam, so long as it still looks like blood, kosher. So as long as it still looks like blood, you could do zrikas hadam with it for the korban. Nisayir bayoyin, if the blood gets mixed together with wine, rono kilu humayim, we view the wine as if it is water, and again we make the same evaluation. If this was water, would it still look like wine? Would it still look like blood or not? If it does, you could use it for zrikas hadam. If not, not. Nisayir b'dam behema or b'dam achaya, if the blood of the korban got mixed together with blood of an animal that's chulin, or blood of a chaya, there are no korbanos that are offered from chayas. Roid also kilu mayim. Once again, we view that blood, that is the external blood, as if it's water, and we make the comparison. If that amount of water was mixed with the blood, would it still look like blood or not? If yes, do zrikas hadam. If no, don't. Reb Yehuda Omer, and once again says Reb Yehuda, ein dam mevatel dam, that blood is unable to be mevatel blood, and therefore blood of the korban that gets mixed with blood of chulin or whatever, since it's blood mixed together with blood, you will still do zrikas hadam because the blood of the korban is still going to be valid. In the blood of the korban in the mixture is still going to be valid. We do zrikas hadam. Now, here's where we make an interesting distinction between zrikas hadam for korbanis and kisui hadam. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan, lo yishanu ela shenaflu mayim l'soch dam, ava nafal dam l'soch mayim, rishin bottle. Amar Reb Papa says Reb Papa linyan kisui eino kain, and dichoy etzom mitzvahs. Very, very, very interesting. This is a concept that we've seen before called kama botil. That if you have, for example, right, so it says, I think it was Rabbi Bar Chana in the name of, no, Reb Chia bar Abbas in the name of Reb Yochanan, that when it comes to zrikas hadam, when it comes to korbanis, he says that it actually depends. It depends if water fell into the blood or if blood fell into the water. What's the difference? The difference is that there's this concept of kama batil. That if you have blood, right, so you shechted a korban and you did kabbalah sadam, you have a klei sharis filled with blood of the korban, and one drop of water falls in to all that blood. So we say that one drop of water is batil to the rest of the blood. Not just that you can't see it. It's not just that there's so much more blood that the water is there, but you can't see it. No, it's batil. It doesn't exist anymore. All you have is blood. And another drop of water gets into the mixture. That also becomes blood. And each drop, as you're pouring in the water, we view it as though each additional drop keeps on becoming batil to all the blood that is there. You don't have any water. It's just all blood. As more and more water is poured into the blood, it just keeps on becoming batil. But then what happens? At a certain point, though, reality strikes. What's it called? You have a reality check. You say, wait a second. I know we keep on saying that bottle, but the fact of the matter is, it doesn't look like blood anymore. It looks like water. So we say at that point, you can't do Zrikas Hadam anymore. So when it's water falling into blood, so we say, look, as long as it still looks like blood, so you could still do Zrikas Hadam, the water is bottle, as the water is being poured in, kama bottle, each drop of blood, it keeps on becoming bottle. And we say, look, as long as it still looks like blood, you could do Zrikas Hadam. But when we have a wake-up call, and we say, wait a second, this looks like water. It doesn't look like blood anymore. So then you can no longer do Zrikas Hadam. So it goes based on the appearance. However, this is when, as I was just describing, it's water that's being poured into the blood. But if it's fakert, if it's the other way around, if you have water and you're pouring the blood into the water, and we're saying kama batil, that each drop of blood is becoming bottled to the water, and all you have is water, and then eventually you turn around and say, wait a second, this looks like blood, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. As the blood is being poured into the water, it's being bottle, and by Zrikas Hadam, by Korbanos, there is no point at which we say, wait a second, this is no longer water, this actually is blood. That doesn't work by Zrikas Hadam. So by Zrikas Hadam, it depends if it's the water being poured into the blood or the blood being poured into the water. If the blood is being poured into the water, so you can't do Zrikas Hadam, period. If it's water that's being poured into the blood, so then we'll say that the water is bottle, and as long as it still looks like blood, you can do Zrikas Hadam with it. And says Rav Papa, but that's not the case by kisui Hadam. By kisui Hadam, even if it's the blood that's being poured into water, and we're saying kama batil, that as the blood gets mixed with the water, we're saying the blood is bottle, all you have is water. But then when you turn around and say, wait a second, this no longer looks like water. This now looks like blood. So that blood that kept on being bottle is reawoken, and now you have blood, and there would be a mitzvah of kisui Hadam. So there is a distinction. So even though we have pretty much the same Mishnah by kisui Hadam and by Zrikas Hadam, there is a distinction that by kisui Hadam, when we say as long as it looks like blood, you do kisui Hadam, that's whether it's the water being poured into blood or whether it's blood being poured into water. The principle is the same. If it looks like blood, there's kisui Hadam. If it doesn't look like blood, then there's no kisui Hadam. When we have this pretty much identical Mishnah by Zrikas Hadam, that is specifically when it's water that's being poured into the blood, then we say as long as it still looks like blood, there will be Zrikas Hadam. If not, then there's no Zrikas Hadam. But if it's blood being poured into water, forget about it. So again, that when we say that by the Zrikas Hadam, if it looks like blood, do Zrikas Hadam, that's with water that's being poured into, that falls into blood. But if it's blood that falls into water, by Zrikas Hadam, rishon bottle, each drop becomes bottle, and forget about it. There's no Zrikas Hadam. Amar Papa says, Papa, however, in kisui enukain, that's not the case. By kisui Hadam, ein dichui etzel mitzvahs. There's no dichui by mitzvahs. We're not going to view it as though the blood gets pushed off forever. And yes, as each drop of blood gets mixed together with the water, bottle. But at a certain point, when you turn around and when you look up and you say, wait a second, this now looks like blood. So the mitzvah of kisui Hadam is back. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, kol mare admumis mechaprin. Whenever it looks like blood, it's mechaper, as we saw by Zrikas Hadam. That as long as the blood still looks like blood, you could do Zrikas Hadam. Umachshirin, and it will be machshir ochel, to be mekabel tumas ochlin. V'chayavin bekisui, and also, as long as it looks like blood, there will be a chiyuv of kisui Hadam. Michael Mashmalan, I don't understand what Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel is teaching us. Mechaprin Tanina, right? We already saw a Mishnah from Masechta Zvachim about the fact that as long as it looks like blood, you could do kisui, you could do Zrikas Hadam. Chayavim bekisui Tanina. And our Mishnah teaches us that as long as it looks like blood, you could do kisui Hadam. Machshirin it's trichalei. Says the Gemara, yeah, but it was for the third case that we needed. to be machshir ochel lekabel tumah. Machshir nami, but I don't understand by that either. Ida machshir mechashri, imayachshir mechashri. Right? Of course, we know, but it comes to tumas ochlin, food. In order for food to be muchshir lekabel tumah, if a dead sheretz falls on food, that food is only going to become tummy if that food had already come in contact with one of the 7 liquids. If the food has already come in contact with one of the 7 liquids, then it's muchshir lekabel tumah, and if a dead sheretz falls on it, the food will become tummy. Now, of those 7, blood is one of them, as is water. So comes Shmuel and he says that as long as blood still looks like blood, it could be machshir ochel lekabel tumah. The Gemara says, I don't understand what. As long okay, if it looks like blood, so it'll be blood. If it doesn't look like blood, then it's water. Either way, it's machshir ochel lekabel tumah. So what are we? I don't understand what the question is over here. Says the Gemara. So lo tzricha shetamdu b'megisham. So the Gemara says it's talking about where the blood got mixed with rain water. Let me chap a shluck of coffee. His coffee is a bit nasty. It's like super old, but that's what we got right now. Hakoponim. So it's talking about where the blood got mixed with rainwater. Why does that make a difference? Because the first Mishnah, Masechta Machshirin, says that kol a mashkin, right? Whether it's tchilasu l'ratzon or whether it's sofa l'ratzon, there has to be some desire for either the liquid to be machshir or for the fruits to become muchsharin. There has to be a desire for water to come in contact with the fruits, either to wash the fruits or whatever it is. But say you have fruits on your roof and all of a sudden it rains and you had no intention, you had no desire for the fruits to get wet. The fact that it rained is not beneficial to you. So the food is not muchshir lekabel tumah. There has to be some amount of desire for either for the liquid to be machshir or for the food to get washed. Now, rainwater, that's not necessarily the case. It just rains on some fruit. But still, says the Gemara, but megisham nami. But also when it comes to rainwater, came into shakil virami achshavinu. The fact of the matter is, you collected this rainwater. And you're mixing it with the blood, so clearly you do care about it. So no, it's talking about where you didn't davka collect the rainwater fell into the blood. So therefore, the rainwater itself will not be machshir lekabel tumah, but the blood that you collected will be, right? You clearly collected it for a reason, it will be machshir lekabel tumah. And so we say, okay, as long as it still looks like blood, so then it will be machshir. But if it looks like the rainwater, it won't be machshir. Okay, fine. Reb Asi Minarvil Omer says, Reb Asi Minarvil, Bitzlalta didma. It's talking about where you have like a whole bunch of, you have a puddle of blood, and you leave it for a while, and the blood starts kind of congealing and separating, and you kind of have like the congealed blood stuff and like the awkward, kind of separated, uncomfortable, watery stuff. You know what I'm talking about? Kind of like when ketchup separates. You know when you open the ketchup and like the water comes out, it's a little freaky. So you have blood and you leave it out for a while and it starts like congealing and like there's like water kind of separates from it. So that's the water that we're talking about. So that awkward water, that awkward blood water, if it looks like blood, so it will be machshir. If it doesn't look like blood, then it won't. Okay. So Abasim and Avil, Omer Bitzlalta Didma. Rabbi Yirmiyah Medifti, Omer says Rabbi Yirmiyah Medifti, Anush Karis. If you eat that awkward, watery blood awkwardness, if it looks like blood, you'll be chayv karis for eating blood. Vuhu diika kazayis, as long as there's a kazayis of blood in that awkwardness. B'masnisa tana, we learn in a brayso mitam ba'oil, vuhu diika revius. If there's a revius of blood in that awkwardness, water separated stuff, so if there's a revius of blood in that stuff, it will be mitame ba'oil ames, as well. Right, as if there's a revius hadam is mitami ba'oil hames. Okay, givaldig. Okay, fine. So that was it for kind of mixtures of blood. And now the Gemara concludes with a discussion of liquids of corpses. Tanan Osam, we learn in a Mishnah over there. Where? Unclear. Kol mashke ames, all liquids of a mace. For example, tears. Any tears that might be in the eyes of the mace. Or a woman that still has milk after she dies. Tahorin, those liquids are tahor. Chutz midamo, but obviously its blood is going to be tameh. And, as we just said, a revius dam is mitami ba'oil. V'chol mare admumis shebo mitamid ba'oil. And also if you have that awkward water that's separated from the mace, also, as long as there's as long as there's a revius of blood, it will be mitami ba'oil. Umashka meis tahorin. Now, is this really true? Right? We had just said a second ago, kol mashka meis tahorin, that, for example, the tears of a mace are tahor. But is that really true? For a minute, we have a contradiction. Mashke tvul yom, the liquids of a tvul yom. Let's say the tears of a tvul yom, or the milk of a woman is a tvul yom, or urine, or spit. Kimashkin she nogea ben, are any of these liquids of a tvul yom? What's a tvul yom? Tvul yom, for example, a dead mouse falls on somebody, she becomes tameh tumas sheretz. So he's a rishon the tumah, goes to the mikvah, and until the end of the day, he can't eat truma or anything. He's a tvul yom. It's a risheni l'tumah, essentially until the end of the day. So any liquids that emanate from a tvul yom are treated the same way, kimashkin shenarogea ben, as liquids that he touches, which is essentially nothing. Right? We learned earlier in the Masechta, we quoted a Mishnah from Masechta Para, that any, right, call a posel satruma, any sheni, what's a posel satruma? Sheni l'tumah. That any sheni l'tumah that comes in contact with water, what happens with it, friends? Becomes a rishon l'tumah. Din d'Rabbanan. That din d'Rabbanan, though, was not applied to tvul yoms. So the concept of a sheni making a rishon when it comes to mashkin doesn't apply to tvul yom. If a tvul yom touches mashkin, it doesn't become a rishon or anything like that. Now, of course, if it's wine that's truma, so a sheni is posel truma. So of course, if it's wine that's truma, so just tvul yom is a sheni the truma. Of course, it's going to be posel truma, but it's not going to make that rishon. Okay, so any liquids that emanate from a tvul yom are basically sheni l'tumah. So they don't, whether it's the liquids that emanate from the tvul yom or liquids that were touched by a tvul yom, they don't become a rishon l'tumah. V'sh'ar kol atmein, but all other tumas, ben kalin ben chamurin, whether lenient, whether stringent, mashkin hayotzim men, any mashkin that emanates from them, ki mashkin ogea boen, is like any liquids that they touched, ve'elu tchila, and there'll be a rishon l'tumah. Chutz min hamashke shu avatuma, except for cases where the mashke is an avatuma. My kalin and my chamurin, what's lenient and what's stringent, that we said that any liquids that emanate from them will essentially be a rishon l'tumah. My lav kalin sheretz v'zav. So let's say kalin is a sheretz or a zav, v'chamurin mace. So let's say that when we talk about lenient, we're talking about a sheretz, right? So for example, if a dead rat has like urine inside of it, dead rat urine, gross. Vizav or a zav, both a sheretz and a zav are an avatuma. The chamurin, let's say that stringent, is a mace, and aviavosatuma. So what are we saying? We said that when it comes to bein kalin, bein chamurin, any mashka yotzemen is a rishon l'tumah. So clearly there is tumah by the liquids of a mace. Lo, no, there's no tumah by liquids of a mace. Kalin sheretz v'chamurin zav. Kalin is a reference to sheretz, whereas chamurin is a reference to a zav. Mashna zav to gozu be'rabanan, umashna mace to gozu be'rabanan. How come when it comes to the liquids of a zav, right? For example, is tears or milk from a zava. So why did we say that those liquids would become a rishon l'tumah, and we didn't say so by a mace? How come by a mace? Right, we're saying that the liquids are tahor, and for the Gemara, zav de lo b'dile inche mine goes b'rabanan, mace to b'dile inche mine lo goes b'rabanan, because a mace, a corpse, people stay away from. People stay away from corpse. Therefore, there was no need to make a gzeira about any of his liquids. People are staying away anyways. A zav, on the other hand, people are not necessarily staying away. You don't necessarily know that a person's a zav necessarily. He just looks like a regular person. So people don't necessarily know to stay away from him. But by making this din derabanan about the liquids of a zav, I guess it kind of makes things more stringent and makes the scenario of a zav more stringent, and I guess creates more caution around zavs and about being around zavs and about zavs being zavs, and so therefore we have to be more stringent when it comes to zavs to make sure that people are going to stay away from them while they are tameh. Friends, on Daf 87, Daf Pei Zayin of Masechta Chullin, we learned about who does kisui hadam. The answer is the shaychit, the one who shechts the chaya or the oaf does the kisui hadam, and he does it with his hand, not with his feet, because that would be kind of disgraceful. We said that if somebody steals his mitzvah, we fine him 10 golden coins, although Tosfos says that we don't do that anymore because you didn't technically cost the shaychit at financial loss, so if we're not actually going to find it, but we do see the significance of allowing somebody to do a mitzvah to do his mitzvah, and not stealing it from him. Tosfos said it's me'uvos shelo yuchal liskon when you steal somebody else's mitzvah. We then discussed when the covered blood becomes exposed. When it was initially covered by a person, it does not need to be recovered. But when it was initially covered by the wind, it must be recovered. And Rav Papa used that as a basis to say, Ein dichui eitzel mitzvahs, that mitzvahs don't get pushed off. So even if it does get pushed off, it's only temporary. And if the wind covered the blood, so you don't have to do kisui hadam while it's covered, but if it gets re-exposed, there is still the mitzvah of kisui hadam. We learned about blood mixtures. So we say you must do kisui hadam when the blood still looks like blood, and that is whether it is water that falls into blood or blood that falls into water. If it looks like blood, you do kisui hadam. If it doesn't look like blood, you don't do kisui hadam. And we said, however, when it comes to zrikas hadam, this principle still applies, but only when it is water that falls into blood. When blood falls into water, then there is no zrikas hadam. We would say kama batil. There's no zrikas hadam. Okay. And finally, liquids of a corpse, we said are tahor. That's like the tears or the milk of a woman. But blood of a corpse, of course, is tameh. And blood serum, that's the awkward stuff, is also tameh when it looks like blood. Friends, that was Daf Pei Zayin, Daf 87 of Masechta Chullin. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Cheers.